Hello, in this video, I'm look at this. Fantastic battles. Okay, let's go. So I've seen this recently on some YouTube videos, mainly how to plays and things like that. I thought I'd pick up the rules myself, see what's like. It's made in 2020, so it's quite recent, and by someone called Nick Wright, who did Regular Wars, which is like a Elizabethan sort of time period, European conflict, if I remember correctly. So let's have a look what's in the book. So first of all, you do get a nice page of contents and the rules. Not too much of the rules really. Where is it now? The rules end here. So 40 pages of rules, and if you can see out there. Then you get several army lists, campaign rules, and you can make your own armies, which is quite nice. Now this game, it does something that I'm usually not a fan of, and that's multi-basing. In this game, from what I've read in the rules, all units are mounted on a base, and you don't take individual models off, but what it is, you have a company. So if I can show an example here. So this is individual company here, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4 is the max you can have in a unit. And the more you have in a unit, obviously, the better the unit performs. But you don't take off companies as it sustains damage as like an overall pool of damage, which is interesting. But because it's individual companies, it's not as static, so you can do some interesting things. Like if I can find the rules for it, there are formations in this. Bear with me a minute. I can find the formation rules. Here we are. So you have line, tortoise, and you have a column formation. So that's really nice to see, because a lot of multi-base systems that I've seen and played before, you don't have that flexibility of what you can do for units, that they're quite static. In this, they're not. Also, another element it does that I really like is you have characters are there for command and control. So for example, here, this army example, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters, and this one can't command, that can command, and these command them. So that's nice that your characters aren't so much there for fighting, they're there to command units. And it's not I go, you go, or alternative activation. It's random game term, a bit like Warlords of Everywhere, where you have like a bag that you put counters in, and you draw a counter out, and it's like, okay, it's your counter, you activate one of your characters. Because it's not you activate units, you activate character, that character activates units around them. So that's a nice touch, that your character, like say, I do like that command control element, and I do like the fact that it's not strictly I go, you go, or even alternative activation. It's got a bit of a hybrid between it. It's one we're starting to see more and more now in tabletop wargaming, and it's a nice. It's more for people who want a narrative game and not so much a tournament game. If you want a tournament game, stick to I go, you go, because that's pretty much set for that. The layout of the rules is in a nice, easy to follow format as well. There's no. I read the rules now, and there's no. I didn't see any type errors or spell mistakes, so that's nice to see, and it flows quite smoothly when you read the rules. It seems like it's quite a lot to take in, but once you actually start reading it, it becomes quite self-explanatory of what things are and how things operate in the game. I've not had a chance to play it yet because I don't have much 10mm. It is agnostic for scale. It says in the back there, scale agnostic with multi-base figures and no individual figure removal. So you can play with 28mm, 6mm, or even 54mm if you've got something even larger. But I think with the game format, I think it'd prefer to play with 6 to 50mm. I think 28mm might be a bit too big for it, for the scope of the game, because it is trying to do the full sweeping scale of this sort of time, medieval or dark age or ancient battlefield. So that's more suited, I think, for small scale. Another thing that's really interesting as well, you might notice on the models, if I can find one here, how there's no actual measurements. Let me find, if I can find stat line. Just bear with me when I can find stat line. Here we are. So on the actual stat line, there's a movement, but it's not in inches. That's in the base size. So when you build an army, you and your opponent have to make sure all your models are on the same base, or your companies rather, are on the same base size, because that base size then becomes the unit of measurement you use throughout the game for movement, for shooting, for retreat, for everything basically becomes, and the command range is then determined by that unit of measure. So if the game recommends I think it's 40mm. Let's have a look. It does say here, yeah, here we are. So it says if you're using, where's it gone now? Yeah, 60mm bases. So that's not the right one. I can't, sorry about this, can't find it now. Do apologise. Yeah, I can't find it now. But it does recommend if you're on 28mm models to use a 60mm base, and if you're using lower than that to use a 40mm base or even a 50mm base. So that again is quite interesting how it's not done in inches and centimeters, but that means the game does scale really well. So if you're using small models, small bases rather, sorry, it scales to that. But it can be quite problematic because if you and your opponent don't have models on the same bases, you're going to have a few issues there. So that could be something that the game comes a bit unstuck. I think that it does require a bit of forward planning with you and your opponent to make sure that all your models are on this, well, your companies rather, sorry, are on the same base sizes. There may be ways around this. If you do a bit of house ruling, if you're okay with that sort of thing. The game also does mention that it's okay to put the models on rectangle bases. It prefers on square bases, but there are a few alterations you have to do to make sure that, so alterations rather, to get around that. Another thing that's really good is how units move in this. So I keep saying units of companies. So individual companies, they're more flexible because it's a smaller unit. Whereas the larger the unit is, the more companies it's comprised of, the less it can do regarding its movement, the more restricted it is because it's a larger mass of bodies. Again, there's something really nice that some games don't really factor in that large body of people is going to be less flexible with their movement. So that's nice to see. It also has charge reactions as well, which is really something I appreciate. So you sort of stand there and watch them charge into them. They respond to being charged. And it's simultaneous combat as well. So it's not just I charged it, I do my attacks, and then you do your attacks. It's simultaneous, it's done there and then at the same time. Another thing that's really interesting, I find, is that the shooting in this game comes before anything else. So even before you've done your orders, you do your shooting, which is interesting to see. And again, that's simultaneous. So both players will resolve their shooting and then apply damage. And then it's onto the action phase, which is they start pulling out tokens to do activations. And then you have the melee phase. So there's only three phases of the game. And it does also have a quite simple sort of psychology, and that's panic. So I can find the rules of panic now. So when a unit breaks or routes, I think it's called this game, it actually does damage to nearby units. I can find the rules for it now. Resolve. Here we are. Units suffer -1 resolve if the scattering unit has equal number of companies or fewer. Units suffer -2 resolve if the scattering unit is larger. So when you take a unit away, it's 2 base widths away, and any friendly units nearby will take damage equal to this little matrix here, whether it's larger or bigger or same size. So units, they don't really accumulate wounds. It doesn't affect their fighting ability, which is a bit annoying, but I can see it now. So example, a dragon here has 6 resolve, so that's quite a big thing, whereas a irregular company has resolve 3. And this is how you build your army. It's a bit like a dragon rampant, as in you have these set stat lines for certain things, and then you add on special rules or traits, as it's called in the game. Now, it's limited. You can only have 3 per unit. So example, I could take an irregular company and I could give them drilled, but that's incompatible with Berserk and Stimulus, so I can't give those 2. So I can give them drilled, Doughty, and I'll give them, let's say, I don't know, amphibious. There we are. So I could have those 3 traits there. You can do a 4th one, and that's through a racial trait. So if your army is comprised, I think you have to have over half, or yes, at least 50% of the army is comprised of the same race, if you will, like goblin, orc, that sort of thing. You can assign a trait to the racial trait. So, example, dwarfs, Doughty, because they're dwarfs, Doughty, sorry, rather. And for things like undead, you can do mindless. And that's a way of getting a 4th trait in there. But again, that's only if you've done your army, so it's 50% or more is of that race, if you will, or type. which is this is nice because that's one thing that Dragon Rampant it didn't have enough of these, I think, when it was building its forces. There's quite a few to pick from. I think there's more here as well. And also with Dragon Rampant, it didn't have limitation, so you could go to town with the traits. But these again, so they've got points in. It's got adjustments. For example, Doughty, it's +1 resistance, and Barrage tells you what it does, and gives you some examples as well. So this is how you build your army. It's quite flexible. Here we have, for example, Goblin Warriors and a regular company, and it tells you what. So they've gone for regular company, and they've given it unreliable, shooting, mix, and furious charge. So that alters the stat line, and that gives you ultimate points at the end. So nice and simple way to build a force. There's also things about characters as well, how many characters you can have in your army, depending on what point size you're playing, if I remember correctly. Here we are. Characters, yeah, so Warlord, you have to have one in your army. And you can choose either a fighty lord or a mage lord, because there are spells in the game as well. And these are the spells you can choose from. And then there's a magic user, captains, and rogues. So you can have like three captains per 500 points, and one wizard mage user per 500 points, and one rogue per army. Rogues are more like an assassin. They're going to go and shank some other characters. That's what they're good at. So yeah, that's how you build your army. It's quite simple. As I say, you can really build an army to suit what you have. Or if you think, okay, I think this, I don't know, my goblins, they're brave goblins, you can do brave goblins. That's going to be one for interesting to play against. Anything else the game does interesting? It hasn't got much in the way of scenarios I've seen. One thing it does have is really interesting, actually, is, I can find it. It's before you set, here we are. So you set up your army, your opponent sets the army, and then you roll for your units. It's 2d6 roll with a set of modifiers. And you can actually have some of your companies just desert the battlefield or start the game with disease. So it represents that amassing a large force, it's not always easy. Some forces are going to find that some of their units have deserted or have got disease or even late or enthusiastic. They've ran forward of the battle line because, again, large masses of people or creatures, if you will, are quite hard to organise into a coherent force. So that's a nice little thing. But again, that ties it into being more for a narrative play and not about competitive play. So if you're more of a competitive mindset player, this may not be for you. But if you like a game where it's more, I think people say being pretzels or just narrative. I think narrative's a better way to say it than being pretzels. So yeah, these are what your units can do. So again, companies more flexible. Group actions, they get quite a few more in characters, and there's charge responses. I can find them as well. Here we are. So you got things like evade, stand, shelter, counter charge, closing shots, or change facing. So a company is more flexible, whereas company and command and group reactions. So yeah, it's really nice. It does also have some example army lists, like it's got Empire of Men, it's got Freemen, let's have a look, Dwarven Kingdoms, Ziggurat Dwarfs, or Chaos Dwarfs, Abyssal Dwarfs, those sort of things, Righteous Elves, or High Elves, Night Elves, that'll be Dark Elves, Wild Elves, Wood Elves, and all those like Goblin Tribes, the Vermintide, so Ratkin, Saurian, like Lizard Men, so undead, it's just generic undead as well, but it combines both wet and dry. So you got like mummies and ghouls and vampires and werewolves. So yeah, combines them both. And you got like these are historical lists now. So you got Homeric Greeks, Trojans, classical Greeks, Achaemenid Persians, mid-Republican Romans, late Carthaginians, early Byzantine, Sassanins, Anglo-Normans, and Hiberno-Norse. Oh, and Conquistadors, Mesoamericas, and that's the list. So there's quite a few lists there. And again, these are all made from the game rules, so they've been adjusted with the special rules and points. There's nothing in here that is unique to these lists, so you can look at how they've made them and just put them in your army if you think they're more, the stat line here is more suited to something that you've got in one of your fancy armies, or you just like to try them out. There's no you have to use these in this list because of the way things are constructed. The back of the book, it has 2 handy pages there for reference. If you know the rules, this pretty much will get you by how you play the game. This is other games that the author has written, and there's also campaign rules. Let me flick back to the campaign rules. It's not a big book, I must say. It's what, I think 70. Let's have a look. 71, 2, 3, 74 pages in total. And random events. So here we are, campaign. Yeah, so campaign. So that's from 42 to, yeah. So about 4 pages of campaign rules as well. So that's enough to get you going for a campaign. So like I said, the one thing that the game is lacking, I find, is there's not much in the way of missions. There seems to be just this one. There's rules for optional flank, but there's only really one deployment type. There's no sort of hold the centre. It has given you optionals for objectives to play, which is nice. Like I say, there's the rules for optional flank marches, and that seems to be it really for missions. So in hindsight, in retrospect, it's a game that I'm looking forward to play. I just think, again, it can come a bit undone with the fact that all models, both yours and your opponent's, have to be on the same base sizes. That's going to be quite tricky, and that's going to be one where the game may find it difficult to get played in certain clubs because people may have different base sizes. Because as we know for any gamers, it's quite hard to get gamers to agree to either one set of rules or one set of basing types. In my experience, you find, especially with these sort of smaller scale models that can be all over the shop, you might find some on individual bases, you might find some on large bases, but that's not a major thing. I think I bought this secondhand somewhere. I can't recall where I managed to pick it up. So it wasn't that expensive. I think I paid about €10 for it, I think. So you should be able to find it. I think it's available on Amazon if you're okay with buying from Amazon. So yeah, check it out if you feel like if you fancy looking at a set of rules that are a little bit different, and you can use with, like I say, they've got 28mm models here, so you can use it. I think these sort of conversion bases they're on here, I think you can get them from Rendetta. I've seen the plastic trays, or might be SAS and Precision wood MDF bases. But yeah, give it a try if you fancy something different. Okay, this has been a look at Fantastic Battles. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, leave a comment below. As always, I'll catch you later.